All right, everybody, Tim here from Workshop 12. We're going to go through the 370Z and we're going to walk through the installation process of being able to get your Brainiac plastics installed into the dashboard. So depending on whether or not you have an automatic or a manual transmission, pulling out this trims could be different. For the automatic, you actually have to get a little bit of wedge in on the plastic and take the plastic out separately. I believe on the standard we should be able to just get our fingers down in there and pull, and you can hear it pop and free up this this area here. So this allows us just to kind of pull this out of the system, and as you can see at the bottom, we're going to expose a couple different plugs on here. One's for the hazard and one's for what looks like S mode on here. So we're able to then disconnect these different connectors on the bottom. So we can then just pull this up off of our trim here. You can disconnect the connectors on the bottom if you like, or just set this aside to kind of continue going. Now, in here, there's a few other different screws. So there's two different bolster pieces here that are going to come off. You've got your main kind of waterfall surround that's going to come out of here as well, and then your actual climate controls and stereo system. So right off the bat, we're going to see that we've got a couple of screws in here that we're going to take out to be able to loosen up our side pieces. All right, so now that we have those different screws loosened up, we should be able to take these side pieces and just pull on them to be able to pop them out. One, you just kind of push out to the side to pop them. That's two. So that now has the two side pieces off of there. And then we've got a couple other screws here. So we see that it exposed two different, in this car, silver screws. These are the ones that are holding this surround piece in. So we can take those out as well. Once you have those two screws out, you should be able to just pull on this waterfall piece here to pop it free. So you can see it just jiggles free, wiggle at it to be able to pop it out. Now, there are two connectors for the push to start and the passenger airbag indicator here, and we'll need to disconnect those two connectors on the back there as well. So that has our main waterfall piece off here. We'll take a look when we do our installation of what we need to take off of the back in order to get the plastics to fit. But that's another step. We now have that removed from the car. Last bit is there's a couple of screws here, two on the bottom, two kind of midway up. And these are our final pieces that actually two on the bottom and two right at the top that are going to connect the stereo in. And there's a couple pieces right back on the back support here as well to release the actual stereo unit itself so that everything comes out. So we've got, looks like we have a total of about 6 different bolts that we need to take out. So we'll remove those two. Here, we should be able to then just grab the stereo and wiggle it out. Now, what you'll want to do as you pull this out is disconnect all of the different electronics off of the back of the radio as well. So sometimes you just need to get into the back and be able to make all of those disconnections. Now, as I do acrobatics in here, one of the things that you can do, there's a unit on the back of your whole climate control radio unit here, and this is going to end up staying in the car. Now, good thing is that plug is crazy to try to get out. So what you're able to do is there's a torque screw on both sides of the unit, and you can just undo those to be able to take this off and tuck it back into the dash. That actually will give you access to the plug on the back of the climate control as well. So it's quite handy just to remove these screws and take this unit right out, because that way we don't have to worry about fiddling around with the plug that's on the back of it. So we've got our two screws to take out on the back. And then from there, we should be able to remove that piece of plastic out of the unit. Again, this we don't need, it's just part of the actual car. We can just tuck it back into the back there, and now we have our climate control out. And what we'll be doing next is disassembling this, so we can actually take off our different pieces here to be able to bring the climate control out and then fasten it onto the back of the Brainiac plastics. So that has the dashboard disassembled. Now it's just the pulling the pieces off and reassembling everything from the Brainiac side of things. First thing that we're going to do on both sides of the stereo is we need to take these brackets off to be able to give us access to the screws for the climate control. Now these are a Torx bit, just the same as the one for that little control module that was in the bottom. So all we got to do is go ahead and remove each of these screws so that we can get this bracket off of the stereo. So now that we've got the side pieces off, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 screws to be able to remove, then we can pop the climate control right out. All right, now we've got the climate control unit out of the holder, and now we're able to take our plastics, that's our front piece for our Brainiac kit, and be able to essentially slide these right down on, and all the holes all realign. Now, this is where you're going to keep your existing screws, and the 5 that you took out, you're going to reuse to be able to put your climate control back in. And as you can see, the climate controls fit perfectly in the environment here, just like they would be inside of the OEM plastics. Okay, so everything's all secured in now with our screws that we've brought into the plastic. So everything's good to go here. So now we can actually just lay this down, and we're going to now secure our tablet in place. Now you're going to take your tablet, you're going to basically push it into the plastics on the back here so it's nice and snug. You can see that it's got cutouts for some of the keys on the side. And at this point is where you would be plugging in your right-angled USB, typically an on-the-go cable, so that you can charge and use accessory, and a right-angled headphone jack. And that's going to allow you to have that in place, and it'll slide in underneath our plastics. And essentially, you're then going to take that plastic and line it up over top of the screw holes on the inside here, and take some small screws and fasten those all in place, and then we'll be ready to basically put it into the vehicle. So we'll just fasten up those screws, and we'll get it installed. The last step that we have to do before putting everything back in the vehicle is we need to remove the top center pocket out of the plastics here. It's held in with 4 different screws. Essentially, they're holding the vents on and creating a sandwich that holds that all in place. So we're going to remove these vents to pop them off, pull this out of the middle, put the vents back in, and then we'll be ready to put it back into the car. So we'll just go ahead and unscrew each of these. Alright, so our installation process is just going to be essentially a reverse of what we went through for being able to disassemble it. We're going to take our USB power source and plug that into our wiring harness. Same with our audio jack being able to come out and go to any kind of amplifier that we have. So we're not going to cover the wiring section. We typically cover generic wiring in another one of our videos. But essentially we're going to take our plastics here and line it up over top of the OEM installation holes. So we line right up with the guide pins that are there with the stock unit, and we can see that we've got screw hole here, screw hole here, one over on this side, and one over here. And we can just reuse the actual screws that we used from the original disassembly of the dashboard. So now that we're actually only using 4 screws here instead of the 6 that was in there to begin with, obviously we're going to have a few different spare parts left over. And as you can see on the back here, we have feet on the back of the unit to make sure that there's nothing that's going to push back into the unit, that it's got feet that can step for any kind of pressing on the top. But even still, it's pretty sturdy just with the 4 screws that are in place. So the next step that we have is to put our outer waterfall in. Again, it follows the same thing. You're going to want to plug in your 2 different, your push to start and your passenger airbag. So you'll put those plugged in, and then you're going to snap all of the plastics back in place just like we did originally. Now we can see here as well, we've got our holes that line up to the new holes that are on our plastic. So we're going to put 2 screws back in there to hold those in place. And then we'll be putting our 2 different side pieces back on, so this side and the other side. Those will get reassembled with 2 screws in there, actually 2 screws on each side, and then we should be able to put our shifter trim back in place. We've got that snap back in place and everything's all installed into the system. So now we've got all the same climate controls that we had before, exact same location. We've got our touch screen for running any of the different apps that we want, or our Brainiac home screen, and we're good to go. Obviously there's some wiring that needs to happen, but essentially that's the installation process of being able to get that 10.1 inch screen into your dashboard.